Alexandria, a gateway to knowledge, stories, and imagination, a digital library without limits, always open, always growing. Subscribe, like, and be part of the journey of discovery.
Chapter 1: The Gathering of Storms. There once lived in Denmark a mighty king named Hetel, whose fame spread far and wide. His wife Hilda gave birth to 2 children, a son and a daughter named Ortwin and Gudrun. They were both blessed with such remarkable strength and beauty that as they grew into adulthood, the entire country praised them. Ortwin was trained in combat by Count Wate, a heroic man who loved the chaos and thrill of battle more than celebrating with noble ladies. From him, the young prince learned all the skills of a knight. Gudrun also grew tall and strong, so strong that she could have handled a sword with honour if such a thing had been proper for a maiden. When the brother and sister stood together, everyone who saw them said, "No sculptor could have created anything half as beautiful." Princes came from both near and far to ask for Gudrun's hand in marriage. But her proud father, King Hetel, rejected every one of them. Some left in sadness, others in anger. Among those drawn by tales of Gudrun's beauty was Siegfried, the king of Moorland, who ruled over 7 princes. He arrived at King Hetel's court with a magnificent group of followers to ask for Gudrun's hand. But he too was rejected like the rest. Furious and humiliated, he left the court swearing that he would not rest until he had taken revenge on the proud king. At that time, in Normandy, there lived a prince named Hartmut. As soon as he heard about Gudrun, he was filled with the desire to make her his wife. His mother, Queen Gerlinda, eagerly supported him. She was a proud and ambitious woman who longed to see her son rise above all other noble suitors. But his father, King Ludwig, said, "How do we even know if this Gudrun is as beautiful as people say she is? Even if she were the most perfect maiden, what good would it do you? Think of how far our kingdom is from Denmark. Her parents would never allow their only daughter to travel so far." But Hartmut refused to be discouraged. Gerlinda added, "Let us send messengers to Denmark. I will give them gold and expensive clothing to present themselves properly." Still, King Ludwig felt uneasy. "I know King Hetel and Queen Hilda well," as he said. "They are both proud and stubborn, and I imagine their daughter is the same." "Even so," Hartmut replied, "I cannot go on living unless Gudrun becomes mine. If I cannot win her through peace, then I will go to war and take her by force." Gerlinda continued to plead with the king until at last he gave in and agreed to let Hartmut try. "As for war," he said, "there is still time for that. Let us first see what can be done through peace." So Hartmut selected 60 knights from the noblest families in the land to present his case to King Hetel. They set out right away, dressed in rich clothes, their shining armour gleaming in the sun. 12 magnificent pack horses followed them, led by servants and loaded with gold and silver. A full 100 days passed before they reached the borders of Hetel's kingdom. There, they found a people skilled in war, most of them wearing helmets and chainmail. When they asked where the king could be found, they were shown the way to the royal castle, Hegelingen. As they rode up to it, the people gathered around them, eager to see the impressive strangers. The king ordered fine accommodations to be prepared for them. On the 12th day, the envoys were summoned before King Hetel. He sat on a shining throne, surrounded by his noblemen, and welcomed them kindly, asking why they had come. One of the knights stepped forward and handed him a letter explaining King Ludwig's request for his son Hartmut to marry Gudrun. But as soon as Hetel read it, his face darkened and he said angrily, "By my honour, does Ludwig dare to insult my crown with such demands? Let him look for a queen for his son wherever he likes, but he must not bring such bold requests to my throne." At these words, the Norman knights stirred, and their swords clattered in their scabbards. But they controlled themselves, and one of them stepped forward and said, Hartmut is worthy to be your son-in-law, O king. There is truly no braver knight alive." Then Queen Hilda, sitting beside the king, raised her head proudly and said, "Do you not know that your prince was once the vassal of my father, King Hagen, whose fame you surely have heard? And now, should the son of my father's vassal take our daughter as his bride?" With that, the knights were dismissed. The next morning, they left the court. Hartmut waited with eager hope for their return, but when they finally rode into the courtyard, their expressions gave him little comfort. Reluctantly, they shared the harsh reply from King Hetel and Queen Hilda. King Ludwig was furious, and Queen Galinda burst into angry tears. Hartmut, however, quietly asked one of the knights, "Is the maiden truly as beautiful as they say?" "My lord," he replied, "she is so fair that anyone who sees her will carry her image in his heart forever." "Then may God punish King Hetel for the insult he has given to me and my house. But as for the maiden, she will be mine. I swear it." These words filled Galinda with joy. Trembling with excitement, she cried, "Ah, if only I may live to see her here." Zealand, the land neighbouring Denmark, was ruled by a young prince named Herwig. He also came to court the fair Gudrun, but King Hetel rejected him just as proudly as he had rejected all the others. Still, Herwig stayed at the court for several months, where he was able to see Gudrun from time to time. Although he continued to ask for her hand, the king's answer never changed. One day, a prince arrived at the royal castle with a dazzling group of attendants. He did not reveal his name, and since he did not propose, King Hetel welcomed him warmly and held a feast in his honour. In this way, the stranger found an opportunity to see Gudrun, and secretly told her that he was Hartmut, and that he had come to Denmark for her and her alone. The maiden felt pity for the brave young knight, whose appearance pleased her greatly, though she had no wish to marry him. She begged him to leave at once, for if King Hetel found out who he really was, he would surely kill him. Sorrowfully, Hartmut left the court. But he did not give up on his goal. Instead, he focused all his efforts on gathering an army to take revenge on King Hetel. Herwig was delighted when the splendid stranger departed, for he had feared that Hartmut might become a successful rival. Once more, he tried to propose to Gudrun, but the king strictly forbade him from ever speaking of it again. So, Herwig decided to invade the land with an army, to show the proud king that he, too, was a powerful prince. Not long after, on a dark night when everyone in the castle of Hagelingen was fast asleep, Herwig landed with a band of brave warriors. At dawn, the watchman on the tower spotted the enemy beneath the walls. "To arms! I'm sorry, he shouted from the tower. The alarm was immediately raised. Trumpets blared through the silence and horns sounded, waking everyone from their sleep. The women of the castle, their hair dishevelled, huddled together in fear or ran to the windows in panic. Meanwhile, showing remarkable composure despite the danger, the knights and squires quickly armed themselves and prepared their horses for battle. When King Hetel saw the emblem on the banners and realised that it was Herwig leading the attack, he was secretly pleased. That a hero would try to win the maiden by force of arms was something he respected. It suited his own bold nature. Herwig, he thought, could not have chosen a better way to win his favour. With Queen Hilda and Gudrun beside him, he stood at a window and watched the fierce battle unfolding outside the castle. He expected to see his knights quickly scatter the followers of this bold suitor. But, to his great surprise, he saw Herwigi pushing forward, step by step. Wherever Herwig's plume waved and his shining sword flashed, the fight was at its fiercest, and many of Hetel's strongest warriors fell before him. Herwig looked magnificent in battle. The helmets of those who came near him sparkled with flying sparks, and their armour was soon streaked with crimson. Even Gudrun, though frightened by the violence, could not help but look at him with admiration. "Now," thought Hetel. "Herwig is worthy of my sword." He put on his armour and strode down to join the fight, only to find his men being pushed back inside the castle. The sound of battle echoed under the stone ceilings. Steel clashed against steel. King Hetel threw himself into the fray with all his might, but even he could not stop the retreat. At last, the two princes came face to face. The older warrior, hardened by 100 battles, and the young knight, eager to win fame of his own. Blow after blow fell on helmets and shields, enough to kill lesser men, but neither faltered. Sparks flew in showers, and pieces of mail clattered to the floor. At last, Hetel stepped back a moment and said, breathing hard, "He who does not wish to be my friend is surely no true man." Then he rushed forward again, and the battle raged even more fiercely. Terrified, Gudrun watched until she could no longer bear it. She grabbed a shield and rushed down, throwing herself between the two warriors. Herwig lowered his sword and looked joyfully at the noble maiden. "Peace, peace, my father, in God's name," she cried. "Let the fight pause until I ask Herwig where his dearest friend might be." "Oh, you know that well," Herwig replied. "But I will not stop unless you permit me to speak with you inside the castle. I mean no harm. I will enter unarmed." So, at Gudrun's request, the two heroes laid down their weapons and entered the castle together in peace. Once inside, Herwig approached Gudrun again and pleaded for her hand. "What maiden could scorn such a valiant hero?" Gudrun said. "Most noble Herwig, there is no girl alive who could care more for you than I do, and if my parents agree, I will gladly stay by your side forever." Then Herwig asked the king and queen for Gudrun's hand. They turned to their daughter and asked if this betrothal would make her happy. She answered that she would choose Herwig as her husband above all others. King Hetel, whose heart had been won by the young warrior's bravery, took Gudrun's hand and placed it in Herwig's. Then all the great lords and vassals were called into the hall, and in their presence the king asked Gudrun once more if she would take Herwig as her husband. "I could never wish for a nobler lord," she replied. So they were betrothed, and a grand feast was held to celebrate their joy. When the celebrations ended, Herwig wished to take Gudrun home with him as his bride, but Queen Hilda begged him to wait until the following spring, since her daughter was still young. In the meantime, she would teach Gudrun all that a future queen should know, and would also have time to prepare a rich collection of wedding gifts. Herwig agreed, though reluctantly. Soon afterward, he said a sorrowful goodbye to his betrothed and returned to his own land, never guessing what terrible events would come from delaying the wedding. The news that Herwig had won the heart and hand of the beautiful Gudrun quickly reached Moorland. When King Siegfried heard of it, still stinging from his own harsh rejection, he was filled with burning hatred for the lucky suitor. "Now I will light a wedding torch for you, Sir Herwig," he shouted, "and it shall set your whole land ablaze." He immediately ordered 20 ships to be prepared and filled them with his best knights. By the end of May, they reached the coast of Zealand, and there began a terrible wave of fire and bloodshed, worse than anything the land had ever seen. Herwig quickly rode out to face his fierce enemy, and a long, desperate battle followed. The soil turned red with the blood of the dead. Herwig and his men fought with great bravery, but they were finally overpowered by Siegfried's larger army and had to retreat into a nearby castle. There, they found safety for a time, though they were surrounded. Siegfried laid siege to the fortress, but one of Herwig's loyal knights managed to slip through the enemy camp during the night. He hurried to Hagelingen and told King Hetel about Siegfried's brutal attacks on Zealand and about Herwig's dangerous situation. When Gudrun heard the dreadful news, she begged her father to come to her betrothed's aid. "I will gladly do so, my daughter," the king declared. "Herwig shall see that I did not pledge my loyalty in vain. I will summon all our allies at once." Messengers were quickly sent out to call upon all his vassals, ordering them to prepare for war without delay. Soon, many noble knights and their warriors gathered, all eager to fight. First came old Wate, the fearless champion, whose courage had never failed, and whose great deeds were known far and wide. Then came Morung, Erolt, Horrend, and the aged Fruti. If these heroes had been in the castle when Herwig tried to storm it, the battle might have ended very differently. King Hetel's son Ortwin also put on his armour and asked for permission to join the army. He was eager to prove his courage for the first time, and to help avenge the wrong done to his sister. Hetel and his entire army soon boarded ships and sailed for Zealand. When Siegfried heard they were coming, he marched out to meet them. A fierce battle followed, and many strong helmets and shields were smashed, but neither side could claim victory. The next morning, the fighting started again. But once more, when the bloody day came to an end, neither side had won. This continued for 12 long days. On the 13th morning, Siegfried looked over his shrinking army and realised he could no longer fight in the open. He retreated with what remained of his men to a strong castle surrounded entirely by water. At first, he believed himself safe from Hetel's swords and spears, but when he saw that the enemy was closing in and laying siege to the stronghold, he deeply wished he were back in his own land. King Hetel sent messengers back to Hegelingen to ease the fears of the Queen and Gudrun. Then he swore a solemn oath that he would not leave that place until Siegfried surrendered. It was a bold vow, and one that would bring him much sorrow, as we shall soon see.
Hello. If you enjoyed our audiobook, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I need your support to bring more audiobooks to you. Thank you in advance for your support.
Chapter 2. A Daughter Lost to War. King Ludwig had many spies in Zealand, and news of King Hetel's vow soon reached him. He asked whether the castle where Siegfried had taken refuge was strong, and when he learned that it could easily withstand a siege for a whole year, he went joyfully to Queen Galinda and Prince Hartmut. "At last," he said, "you are endured. Last, he said, "the hour of our revenge is near." He explained how King Hetel had gone to Zealand with all his bravest knights to support Herwig, leaving his own land poorly defended. Galinda was thrilled that the king was ready to avenge the insult she had suffered. She even brought gold from her personal treasury to help arm the knights. Hartmut too was overjoyed. He began preparing himself and his followers with great energy, not so much for revenge, but because he hoped at last to win the maiden he loved so deeply. When all was ready, King Ludwig's army set sail. After sailing for many days, the eager warriors finally spotted, one morning, the shining towers of Matalan, the castle where Queen Hilda and Gudrun lived. They landed in secret, under the cover of a nearby forest, and managed to get close to the castle walls without being seen by the guards. King Ludwig wanted to attack right away, but Hartmut convinced him to wait. He wanted to make one final attempt to win Gudrun peacefully. So he sent 2 wealthy counts to carry a message to her. But when Gudrun heard what they had come for, she answered firmly, "Tell your master that I am betrothed to King Herwig, and I will never break my promise to him." The counts warned her that Hartmut loved her so much that he would carry her away by force if she refused to go willingly. At this, Gudrun's knights laughed in scorn, so confident were they in the strength of the castle and their own fine swords. They had no idea that an army was hidden in the forest. The messengers were sent away, and fine clothes and wine in golden and silver goblets were offered to them, but they proudly refused the gifts. "Ha!" cried the Danes in anger. "If you scorn King Hetel's wine, then your blood shall be poured instead." The counts returned to Hartmut and told him all that had happened. "Alas," Hartmut said, "such words have been spoken. Now I have no choice left." The battle flags were raised, and Hartmut advanced with his warriors. At first, Queen Hilda was overjoyed when she saw the approaching knights, thinking that some good fortune had brought King Hetel back. But soon, when she saw the symbol on the banners, she realized it was Hartmut who was coming, and she ordered the castle gates to be locked at once. Her knights, eager for battle, rushed out to fight, but they had barely reached the enemy when King Ludwig came out of the forest with a second army. He threw himself into the battle and cut down the Danes like a farmer cutting wheat. Before long, the gates of the castle were forced open, and the victorious banners of Ludwig and Hartmut flew over the towers of Matalan. Hartmut found Gudrun in the great hall, her cheeks pale with fear. "You scorned me once," he said, his voice torn between love and fury, "and for that I should scorn to take anyone here as a prisoner. I should order that all be slain." Gudrun turned away in tears and cried, "Oh, my father, if only you knew what has happened to your poor daughter." Terrible destruction was carried out in the castle by Ludwig's soldiers. Hartmut could not stop them, though he refused to allow the castle to be burned. Gudrun and 30 of her women were taken captive and brought to the ships. For 3 days the Normans pillaged and devastated the land. Then they returned to their ships, heavy with spoils. On the 4th morning they raised their anchors and sailed away toward home. King Hetel now, joined by Herwig and his warriors, still kept up the siege of the castle, where Siegfried continued to resist every attack. One day, messengers from home arrived. When Hetel saw them approaching, he rushed forward joyfully and cried, "Tell me quickly, good men, how are my wife and my dear daughter Gudrun?" The messengers lowered their eyes, and one of them said with sorrow, "Great misfortune has fallen upon you, my lord. Your cities have been burned and your castles destroyed. A full 1,000 brave knights have died defending your house. The enemy has stolen your treasures, and your daughter Gudrun has been taken captive." At these words, the king grabbed the man roughly and shouted, "You speak madness, man! Who could have done such a thing? Speak! Tell me now!" "It was Ludwig of Normandy and his son Hartmut, my lord," the messenger answered. "They suddenly appeared at Matalan with a mighty army." Then the king cried out and tore his long grey beard in anguish. News of the disaster quickly spread through the camp, and the warriors Herwig, Wattier, Eorot, Fruit, and Horand came rushing to his side. In deep grief, King Hetel cried, "My dear, loyal friends," he said in despair, "great tragedy has befallen my kingdom. While we were away, our enemies struck our poorly defended lands. Our brave warriors have fallen, our castles are destroyed, and our lands burn. But worst of all, my beloved daughter Gudrun has been taken captive. The same daughter I refused to give to the Norman prince as his bride. Now she suffers in chains because of my decision." Tears ran down Herwig's face as he heard this dreadful news, and all were shaken by the grief of Gudrun's father and her beloved. Only Count Wattier stayed calm. "Take heart, my lords," he said, "for the day will come when our sorrow will turn to joy. Stop these laments, I beg you, lest Siegfried hear them and take pleasure in your suffering." Hetel tried to steady himself and asked, heavy with sorrow, what should be done. Wat answered, "We must press Siegfried so hard on every side that he will gladly accept an offer of alliance. Once he agrees, we will have his help and be free to chase down those base thieves." This plan lifted everyone's spirits. The next morning, they launched the fiercest assault on Siegfried's castle he had ever seen. Many knights on both sides were killed. Then Eorot shouted up to the defenders on the walls, "If you want peace, ask it of King Hetel. Otherwise, not a man among you will return alive to his homeland." Siegfried answered, "I cannot in honour beg peace from any man. And do you think you can defeat us? It will only mean more heroes dead on both sides." Then Fruit called out, "Swear that you will forever stay with us in loyal service, and you may leave in peace." Siegfried and all his knights raised their hands and swore the oath. Then the gates of the castle were opened. Siegfried and King Hetel clasped hands, and the other knights did the same. All became friends, though only days before they had been fighting to the death. King Hetel opened his heart to Siegfried and told him about the terrible disaster that had fallen upon them. And Siegfried said to Herwig, "As much as I once hated you for winning the love of Gudrun, whom I also wished to marry, now I will loyally help you win her back from Hartmut. If you had not burned my ships, we could have gone after those Norman thieves right away." "There is a group of pilgrims near the shore," said Wat. "They have 10 large ships and many smaller boats. We will take those ships, whether they agree or not." Everyone welcomed this idea. Wat, along with 100 knights, immediately brought the ships to shore. The pilgrims, whose valuables had been safely left on land, were calmed with promises that the ships would be returned soon. The next morning, King Hetel and all his men boarded the ships. A strong wind filled the sails, and they quickly set off across the sea. King Ludwig and Hartmut, meanwhile, had arrived at a green, thickly wooded island called Wolpensand. There, they decided to set up camp and rest for a while from their long journey. Often, Gudrun would gaze sadly across the water, the tears running freely down her cheeks, unnoticed and unheeded. Several days passed like this, until, around noon, one day, white sails appeared on the distant horizon. The news was brought at once to Ludwig and Hartmut, and they hurried to the shore. At first, they saw crosses on the sails, and assumed they were ships carrying pilgrims. But after a while, Ludwig narrowed his eyes and said, "Those ships shine and glimmer as though filled with stars. It is the reflection from helms, shields, and spear tips. Up, warriors, arm yourselves to meet them." The camp broke into sudden chaos. Everyone rushed to take up arms, and soon the shoreline was lined with shouting warriors ready for battle. Ludwig's banner fluttered in the breeze, and he cried out, "Now, by my faith, what we did before was nothing compared to what we now face. Stand firm, brave knights, and you shall be richly rewarded." Closer and closer came the hostile fleet, carrying King Hetel, Herwig, Siegfried, and all their warriors, until the two armies were within range of each other's spears. Then came a thunderous crash of javelins and arrows, so loud that even the sound of the waves was drowned. Quickly, Hetel's men climbed into boats and rowed ashore. Count Wat waded through the sea up to his chest and charged ahead, with King Hetel, Herwig, Ortwin, Fruit, and their brave men following him. Soon, the sea far out was stained red with blood from countless wounds. Ludwig saw water and hurled a spear at him, but water caught it with his shield, and it shattered into pieces. As water reached the shore, he struck King Ludwig with such force that he sent him reeling backward. With that, King Hetel's men gained the land, and the true battle began. The fight raged until nightfall, and neither side had gained the upper hand. Weary and bloodied, the warriors lay down for a short rest. But at dawn, the battle trumpets blared once again, and the struggle resumed. The tide of battle surged back and forth, with short lulls followed by even fiercer clashes. At last, the two kings, Hetel and Ludwig, met in the centre of the field. King Hetel fought like a lion robbed of its cubs. His sword whistled through the air as he struck blow after blow on Ludwig's helmet and shield. But Ludwig, a seasoned warrior, was a match for him. At last, Ludwig struck Hetel with such power that the king fell dead at his feet. A great cheer rose from the Normans at the sight. News of King Hetel's death quickly reached Gudrun's tent, and the poor maiden let out a cry of anguish before fainting on the spot. Count Wate, enraged like a wild beast, fought with unmatched fury. Many of the enemy fell before his sword. But despite all efforts, King Hetel's army could not gain the victory, and night fell once again, without Herwig rescuing his bride. Watchfires were lit, and the two armies camped so close that the glow of each side's armour was clearly visible. That evening, King Ludwig met with Hartmut in his tent. Fearing Water's strength, Ludwig suggested they retreat during the night. To cover their escape, he ordered drums and trumpets to sound as if the army was celebrating and preparing for a triumphant battle the next day. The plan was quickly put into action. The ships were loaded in haste, and the captives, including Gudrun, were taken aboard. The women were warned to stay silent if they valued their lives. Ludwig's army had suffered so many losses that they could not even crew all their ships and were forced to leave many behind. Still, their plan worked. Under the cover of night, they sailed away, and a strong wind quickly carried them out to sea. The next morning, a thick mist covered land and sea. Wart, ready to fight, sounded his horn, and the knights leaped once more to arms. But just then, the sun broke through the clouds, revealing a terrible truth. The entire battlefield lay empty before them. The enemy had vanished. The ground was covered with corpses, broken weapons, and torn banners. A few abandoned ships rocked in the waves near the shore. At the sight, such fury seized Wat that none dared speak to him. Ortwin cried, "Let us pursue them at once!" But Fruit, who had been studying the wind, replied, "It is no use now, my lord. They have a full 30 miles lead on us, and, with the few men we have left, we cannot risk a chase." "Then we shall take vengeance on the dead," shouted grim Irolt. "Let their corpses rot unburied and feed the ravens." But Herwig rebuked him gently, saying, "No, my friend, we must not do such a thing. Let us dig graves and bury both friends and foes together. Dead foes no longer bear our hate. Let not a hero's fame come late." So they did just that. When all the fallen had been laid to rest, the warriors, with heavy hearts, boarded their ships and began the sorrowful voyage home. Soon, Queen Hilda's castle rose before them out of the sea, and from many armoured chests came groans of grief. Ortwin cried, "How can I face my mother now? Not only have we failed to rescue Gudrun, but my father now lies buried beneath the stones of Wulpen Sand." Herwig also hesitated, dreading bringing such bitter news to Queen Hilda. None among their companions wanted to deliver it. But when they reached the shore, Count Wati said roughly, "There's no use trying to hide the truth from the Queen," and rode straight to the castle. His face was so grim that everyone who saw him shrank back in fear. But Hilda, who had already noticed how few ships had returned, rushed anxiously to meet him. With a trembling voice, she asked about her husband. "I will not lie to you, my lady," said Wat, his rugged face dark with sorrow. "The king is dead, and with him most of our brave comrades." Then he told her all about the terrible battle on the island. News spread quickly. Cries of mourning and wailing filled the castle, and all the knights joined in the sorrow. The whole court was plunged into grief. Only Wheat kept his strength. "Peace, peace, my friends," he cried. "No tears or sighs will raise the king from the grave or bring Gudrun back to us. We are too few to act now. But in time, a new generation will rise, strong enough to take up arms. Then our day of reckoning will come." As King Ludwig's fleet neared the coast of Normandy, the gleaming towers of his royal castle shone brightly across the green waters. In the distance, fertile fields and wooded hills stretched out under the golden sunlight. The king brought Gudrun up to the deck, her trembling companions following behind. He spoke gently to her and said, "Maiden, look upon the land where one day you shall be queen." Hartmut gazed at Gudrun with deep longing, hoping that at last she might return his feelings. But Gudrun replied firmly, "I would rather die than marry Hartmut. It was he who caused all this sorrow by invading our land, and if not for him, my noble father, who now sleeps in his grave on that distant island, would still be alive. These words stirred the king's anger, but he held back his fury and said coldly that she must learn to accept what had happened, since it could not be undone. She must choose, he warned, between royal honours and a life of shameful captivity. But Gudrun stood tall and unafraid. "I have sworn loyalty to Herwig," she said, "and only death will release me from that promise." She had barely spoken when the enraged King Ludwig grabbed her by the hair and threw her into the sea. Hartmut, horrified, rushed to save her, but it was too late. For a moment, Gudrun's golden hair floated above the waves. Then she vanished beneath them. Without hesitation, Hartmut dove in after her, and both disappeared under the surface. The people aboard the ship watched anxiously, fearing the king's son might also drown. But Hartmut soon surfaced, holding Gudrun in his arms. The crew, having already launched a small boat, swiftly pulled them both to safety. Hartmut handed Gudrun over to her women and ordered them to take her below and give her dry clothes immediately. Then he turned to face his father. His face was flushed with anger. "Why would you try to drown the woman who means more to me than life itself?" he demanded. "By my honour, if any other man had done what you just did, he would have paid with his life." King Ludwig's face darkened. "Boy, do not speak to me in such a way. I am old and have earned honour, and you shall show me honour until the day I die. Warn Gudrun that she must watch her words when she speaks to me again." Chapter 3: A Maiden of Iron and Snow. Soon, the fleet reached the shore, and Hartmut sent messengers ahead to his mother, instructing her to prepare to receive Gudrun with the honour due to her rank. Galinda was delighted when she heard that the daughter of that proud king, who had once insulted her so deeply, was now a prisoner aboard the Norman ships. She ordered the finest clothing to be prepared, more to show off her own wealth than to please her son or honour Gudrun. Hartmut had a sister named Gudrun, who was full of joy at the thought that Gudrun would soon become her beloved sister. Eager and kind-hearted, she helped in every way to prepare for the festivities. 3 days passed in this way, and on the morning of the 4th day, a splendid procession made its way from the royal castle to the seashore. Galinda and Gudrun led the way, riding white palfreys and dressed in magnificent silk robes woven with gold. Behind them rode a dazzling group of knights, all richly dressed. The joyful sound of music reached the ships, but to Gudrun it sounded more like the harsh cry of an owl. She and her maidens were soon brought ashore. The broken-hearted Gudrun stepped onto the shore with unsteady feet, shrinking back when Hartmut tried to offer her his hand. She approached Queen Galinda with quiet dignity, despite the pain that weighed heavily on her. Gudrun, eager to show her kindness, was filled with joy at the thought of welcoming Gudrun as a sister. To her, this noble maiden already felt like family. But as she came closer and looked into Gudrun's eyes, her joy vanished. Those eyes were full of tears. Gudrun's heart sank in sorrow. The 2 young women clasped hands gently. They shared a silent kiss, speaking no words, but in that moment each understood the other completely. Their grief and compassion needed no explanation. Then Queen Galinda stepped forward, smiling with false warmth, and moved to greet Gudrun with a kiss. But Gudrun turned away sharply. "Do not come near me," she said with proud defiance. "You are the cause of all my suffering. To accept your embrace would be a disgrace I cannot endure." Galinda pretended not to hear, though her heart swelled with rage. Tents were now set up on the sunny green meadow, and Hartmut did everything he could to please and comfort Gudrun. There was music, tournaments, and games, but Gudrun's tears flowed without end. Nothing Hartmut offered could bring her peace. She sat with her head resting on Ortrun's shoulder, and Ortrun wept with her. Seeing her sorrow, Hartmut ordered the festivities to end, and gave the signal to return to the castle. At the castle, Gudrun found that luxurious rooms had been prepared for her and her maidens, but to her, they felt like a tomb. In truth, she would have welcomed the thought of never waking again. Many months passed, during which Hartmut showed Gudrun constant devotion and left no opportunity unused to express his love. Yet the king's daughter never forgot the one to whom she had pledged her heart, the one whose golden ring she still wore on her finger. One day, in Hartmut's presence, Queen Galinda said to Gudrun, "When will you yield, stubborn girl? Delay no longer, give your hand to Hartmut, who is surely the equal of any king alive." Gudrun turned to her and asked calmly, "Lady Galinda, would you have taken as your husband the man responsible for the deaths of so many of your own people?" Knowing how deeply her son desired Gudrun, Galinda answered, "Do not cling to the past, foolish maiden. Marry the one who loves you, and I shall gladly give up my crown to you." Gudrun's eyes filled with tears and her cheeks flushed as she replied, "Can love be born from treachery and bloodshed? The tears in my eyes blur the gleam of any crown. My heart thirsts for freedom, and I dream of it day and night. I will remain a captive, but I shall never marry the man who killed my father." She left the hall weeping. Hartmut sprang to his feet in anger. "Enough of this! Since she continues to scorn me, I will show her favour no more." This filled Galinda with secret delight. She believed that the proud princess would now fall under her control. She followed Hartmut and said, "My son, you cannot manage Gudrun. She is too defiant. But I am more experienced. Leave her to me, and you will soon see her pride broken." "May heaven grant it," Hartmut replied. "I could easily force her to be mine, but my heart recoils at such cruelty." "Trust me," said Galinda eagerly. "Everything will be just as you wish." "But do not forget her rank," Hartmut said, "and remember, she has suffered more than enough already." The next morning, Hartmut left the court and took his leave of both parents. Before departing, he spoke once more with his mother and begged her to treat Gudrun with kindness. Then he rode away with his followers, hoping to forget his sorrow in the trials of battle. He still carried the hope that one day Gudrun's heart would turn toward him. If only he had known the cruel thoughts brewing in Galinda's mind, he would never have left. The moment Hartmut vanished from sight, the queen unleashed her malice. She stormed up to Gudrun and snarled, "Since you scorn the love and favour of a king, you shall live like a servant and eat the food of beggars." Gudrun answered calmly, "Alas, I am in your hands and must endure whatever punishment you inflict. But know this, Queen, nothing you do will ever break my loyalty." "Then your maidens shall serve too," Galinda snapped. "They shall heat ovens, carry wood, sweep floors, and haul away refuse. I will teach you what it means to defy me." Gudrun was deeply pained that her companions, who were all noble-born, should be made to suffer because of her, but she was powerless to stop it. Soon, Galinda's threats came true. Gudrun was separated from her companions and forced to do the lowest, most degrading tasks in the castle. Yet when the queen one day mocked her and asked how she now liked life at court, Gudrun replied softly, "The good Lord who gave me strength to remain faithful also gave me the strength to endure the trials that have followed." 3 long years passed in this way. At last, Hartmut returned from his journeys, covered in glory and rich with honours. Full of hope, he rode joyfully back into the castle. But what horror gripped him when he saw the noble princess dressed in rags, reduced to a servant's work. "Alas, my mother, what have you done?" he cried. He went straight to Gudrun and took her hand. "Believe me, noble maiden," he said with sorrow, "this shame is not my doing. If you will only look kindly upon me, I promise your sorrow will be turned into joy." But Gudrun answered firmly, "I have told you before, my heart belongs to the man to whom I gave my vow. Leave me now, and let me endure the misery your honour should never have allowed." Hartmut then reminded her of how he had risked his life to save her from drowning. "Can you turn away from such love and leave it unrewarded?" he asked. Gudrun replied, "Was it not you who tore me from my home and all I loved? Was it not you who helped bring about my father's death? And now you ask for my thanks." "Have it your way then," Hartmut said angrily. "Stay in your misery. It was not I who caused it, but truly it seems you deserve it." Yet it was not long before his love for Gudrun stirred again in his heart, and he resolved to try one more time to win her over. Hartmut now went to his sister, Ortrun, and said, "Please comfort Gudrun and be a true sister to her. She has suffered through so much sorrow. Try also to gently turn her heart toward me with kindness. If you can do this for me, dear sister, I will be forever grateful." Ortrun wept with joy at his words. She embraced her brother and replied, "How happy I will be if I can once again see your love returned. Our mother forbade me from approaching Gudrun, and it has grieved me deeply." Then Hartmut said, "From now on, you shall share all your joys with her, Ortrun. Perhaps if we bring happiness into her life here, her heart may one day be mine." Overjoyed, Ortrun went to Gudrun at once and asked for her love and friendship. She told her the good news. By Hartmut's own wish, they were now to share the same chamber. The two noble maidens warmly embraced and admitted that they had missed one another deeply. Brighter days began for Gudrun. She spent all her time with Ortrun, whose only goal was to bring comfort and joy to her sorrowful companion. When Gudrun spoke of her homeland and her people, Ortrun listened with deep sympathy and often wept with her. She would gladly have welcomed the Danish princess as her sister-in-law, and never missed a chance to speak kindly of Hartmut, whom she loved dearly. But as time passed, Ortrun saw more clearly that Gudrun's loyalty would never change. This troubled her greatly, for she feared her friend would soon face more suffering. The winter passed, and then the summer, and another winter began to draw near. Gerlinde now urged her son to make one final request to Gudrun, to ask her once more to become his queen. Hartmut agreed and went to Gudrun. Once again, he pleaded with her to be his wife and queen. Again, she refused. Hartmut asked her whether he was not as worthy of her love as Herwig, but Gudrun answered simply, "Herwig has my promise, and I will not break it." Hartmut argued, "Surely Herwig has broken faith with you. All these years he has let his sword rust in its sheath. He has not attempted to come for you." "I do not understand it either," she admitted, "but even if he has forgotten me, I will remain true to him until death." Hartmut returned to Gerlinde and said, "Nothing will change her heart. I can do no more. Deal with her as you wish." Then he warned his knights to stay vigilant. "If Gudrun's friends and family are as loyal as she has proven herself to be," he said, "then we may yet face an army invading our land." From that day forward, new hardships were laid upon the king's daughter. When the furious Queen Gerlinde ordered her to return once more to menial labour, claiming it was only pride that kept her from accepting Hartmut's hand, Gudrun answered calmly, "God knows my heart. If it is his will that I must suffer in this way, then I shall not rebel. I will do all that you command of me, as long as it does not break the vow I have sworn to Herwig." Gerlinde replied coldly, "Then your daily task shall be to wash clothing, and make sure you are not found idle for even a single hour, from dawn until nightfall." And so Gudrun, though she had never done such work before, was forced to labour day after day, scrubbing and rinsing garments. Galinda took every chance to taunt and mock her whenever they crossed paths. Meanwhile, Hartmut walked the halls of the castle in silence, speaking kindly to no one. His heart was heavy with sorrow. Despite her noble birth, Gudrun threw herself into her task with such diligence that before long, it would have been hard to find a better washerwoman in all the land. But her faithful companions were heartbroken to see their beloved mistress enduring such humiliating toil. One among them, however, named Herregard, broke her loyalty. She married a Norman duke, the king's cupbearer, and through that alliance gained favour at court. Everything went well for her after that, but all the other maidens remained true to their homeland and to one another through every hardship. Among them was Princess Hildberg, who was especially grieved by Gudrun's suffering. She wept often and lamented her friend's fate so bitterly that Galinda eventually noticed. With malicious pleasure, the queen said to her, "Since you are so moved by Gudrun's misery, then go and take her place when she grows weary." "I would gladly bear all her burdens, if I could," Hildberg replied. "In God's name, madam, do not put the maiden to such shame. Remember, her father wore a crown, and I, too, am the daughter of a prince, yet I would count myself lucky just to share her fate." "Now, by my faith, you shall surely do just that," Galinda snapped. "For your insolent words, you will march through the snow with Gudrun every day to the shore, and I will see to it that you are given more than enough work to wear you down." But Galinda had no idea that what she intended as punishment brought joy to Hildberg's heart. She could hardly wait for the day to end. When she finally saw Gudrun returning from her daily labour, tired and worn, she ran to meet her, and the two embraced with tears in their eyes. "I persuaded that cruel woman to let me come with you to the shore and share your work," said Hildberg. "May God reward you for your loyalty, dear Hildberg," Gudrun cried, embracing her again. "If I have you to talk with while I work, the hours will pass more quickly." And so, from that morning on, the two young women went together to the shore each day, carrying their baskets. Though the work was hard and painful, their friendship and devotion gave them the strength to endure their suffering with patience and quiet hope. All this time, Queen Hilda, along with Gudrun's lover Herwig, her brother Ortwin, and all her loyal friends, believed that Hartmut had forced Gudrun to become his wife. Yet even with this belief, their determination remained firm, to avenge the insult and bring Gudrun home. To prepare for this mission, Queen Hilda had 7 large, sturdy ships built, along with 22 smaller vessels. Vast stores of weapons and armour were gathered, and when everything was nearly ready, she summoned old Irolt to the castle. "I wish to build a cloister on the Walpen Sand in honour of my husband," she told him, "and once that is done, my faithful warriors shall begin the voyage to Normandy." "The day of vengeance is near indeed, O Queen," Irolt replied. "A brave and strong generation has grown to manhood. I believe the time is right to call your allies from far and near." Queen Hilda was encouraged by his words. She immediately sent messengers first to Herwig of Zealand, who welcomed them with joy. He had long suspected the purpose of their visit. "Noble Herwig," the messengers said, "the time has come to avenge the Queen's sorrow, and she counts on your sword." "I have not forgotten Gudrun," Herwig answered, "to whom I gave my solemn word. Hartmut has held her captive all these years, in defiance of justice and honour. Tell your queen I will join her without delay, bringing my knights with me. Never before has war stirred my heart as this one does." The messengers then continued to Queen Hilda's other friends and allies, Horant, Morung, Frute, and Wate. Every one of them gave their pledge to be ready. When Hilda received this news, she sent word to her son Ortwin, who had long been waiting for this day. He was out hawking in the forest when the messengers found him, and he rode to meet them with eager joy. As soon as he heard their message, he tore the hood from his falcon and set it free. Now I hunt a greater prize, he thought, one I have long waited to pursue. He rushed to his mother's side and immediately sent word to his followers to gather as quickly as possible. The messengers spread the news swiftly across the land. The long years of mourning were at an end. Warriors seized their swords and began to prepare for battle. The war horses were fitted with armour, and banners were unfurled to the wind. Along the western coast, hundreds of masts rose up like a forest above the sea. At last, all was ready. The heroes went before Queen Hilda to ask her blessing and permission to depart. She gave them her blessing, and after embracing her son for the last time, she turned to the warriors and said, "Watch over him faithfully, my friends. I know he is brave and strong, but he is still young and has little experience in war. Stay close to him, and do not let him rush too far into danger." The heroes boarded their ships, which were already loaded with supplies and weapons. A great crowd gathered along the shore to witness their departure. Anchors were lifted, white sails were unfurled, and the wind filled them as the fleet moved out to sea. Women waved farewell to their husbands. From the ships came the sound of trumpets and drums, and the warriors sang a war song as they sailed farther and farther into the gleaming waters. Count Wat led the way, steering the fleet toward the island of Wolpensand. After several days at sea, they finally saw the green outline of the island ahead, but before they could reach it, a powerful storm arose. Waves as tall as mountains crashed upon them. The ships groaned and creaked under the pressure. The tall masts bent and swayed. The sky grew black, and red lightning flashed across the clouds, striking the sea with terrifying force. "Hark!" cried Horant. "Do you hear that wailing? I believe King Hetel finds no peace in his unconsecrated grave." These words ignited a fire in Ortwin's heart. Driven by the need to bring peace to his father's soul, he tore a wooden cross from the mast and leapt into the raging sea. The waters swallowed him instantly. His comrades feared him lost, but moments later, a flash of lightning revealed him rising above the waves. He fought his way through the water and, by the grace of God, reached the island. There, on the mound that marked his father's burial, he planted the cross and knelt in prayer. From the ship, his comrades saw him lit up by the lightning, a noble figure bathed in a fiery glow. The sight gave new strength to many despairing knights, and they fought with renewed courage against the storm. The thunder lessened, the wind calmed, and soon the golden sunlight broke through the clouds. The ships sailed safely into shore. For many days the warriors remained on Wolpensand, praying for the souls of the fallen. Few among them did not have a friend or relative buried there. Their mourning only strengthened their resolve for the battle to come. By that time, Siegfried had also remembered his oath. He arrived to join them with many ships and a large number of men. With the full fleet assembled once more, they all set out again upon the sea. Chapter 4. A Prince Among Beasts. The journey to Normandy was long, and time often dragged for the warriors, who were eager for action. When the wind failed and the ship stood still, some of the knights would gather on the deck to pass the time. Often the older warriors would share stories of their adventures or their ancestors. One day, a group of younger knights gathered around the old hero Fruit and asked him to tell the tale of Hagen and the Griffin. Fruit agreed, and after settling himself on a pile of armour and leaning against the mast, he looked out at the calm sea. The sun was setting, and its red glow reflected across the water, casting warm light on the face of the aged knight. The younger men sat in a circle at his feet as he began. Long ago, there was a king in Ireland named Sigeband. His wife gave birth to a son named Hagen, and from the moment he was born, people marvelled at his strength. By the time he was 7 years old, he no longer wished to stay with the women of the court. He wanted only to be among warriors and learn to handle weapons. King Sigband encouraged him, and Hagen quickly became so skilled with the sword and spear that even the oldest fighters were amazed. They had never seen a boy like him. One day, Queen Ute was sitting on the battlements of the castle, gazing sadly into the distance. King Sigband approached and asked her why she was troubled. "My dear lord," she answered, "we are rich in land, subjects, honour, and fame. But one thing we lack, and it troubles me deeply. At my father's court, knights of great renown came and went, and there were constant feasts and tournaments. The stories of those days spread far and wide. But here, we only pile up gold and jewels in our treasure rooms and forgo the joys that might one day serve us in need, through blood, glory, and legacy." "You speak truly, my wife," the king replied. "From now on, I will act as other princes do. Tomorrow I will send messengers to summon our friends from all corners of the land. We shall hold a grand festival." Queen Ute was overjoyed. "Then I will open my treasure chests and bring out rich garments embroidered with gold and jewels. We will reward the winners of the games as they deserve." Spring arrived, and with it, the time for the great celebration. The fields bloomed with flowers and the woods rang with birdsong. From every direction came knights with fluttering banners and shining armour. The enormous castle, with its 60 towers, was quickly filled. Tents were pitched outside the walls to house the overflow, and the king and queen made sure every guest was well cared for. The air was filled with music, laughter, and the clash of lances in the tournaments. For 9 days, the celebration continued, filled with joy. But on the 10th day, tragedy struck. In the great hall, a travelling minstrel had just begun to sing a heroic ballad. King Sigband and Queen Ute were seated on their thrones, surrounded by knights and ladies. Meanwhile, the young Prince Hagen had wandered into the garden with his attendants. Drawn by the music, the attendants forgot the boy and gathered near the door of the hall. Left alone, the child ran happily about, enjoying his freedom. Then suddenly, with a crash of breaking branches, a monstrous griffin swooped down from the sky. It seized the boy in its claws and lifted him into the air, beating its enormous wings as it rose. Hagen screamed, and his cries reached the hall. Everyone rushed outside in horror, but it was too late. The griffin was already high in the clouds, and in moments it disappeared into the distance. All joy vanished from the castle. Laughter was replaced by cries of grief. The celebrations ended in mourning. The king and queen were nearly broken by sorrow. Yet Hagen was still alive. Terrified, he looked down from the sky at the shrinking world below. The griffin flew faster than any storm wind, and soon the sea was beneath them. He was carried more than 100 miles from home before they reached a jagged chain of mountains on a distant island. There, the griffin landed on a rocky peak and dropped him into a nest before flying off again. In the nest were several young griffins, who stretched out their necks hungrily, flapping their wings with a roar like crashing waves. Each one tried to seize the boy for itself, and they began fighting fiercely. One of them managed to grab Hagen and flew with him to the top of a tree. But as it landed, the branch broke under its weight, and Hagen slipped from its claws. He fell to the ground unharmed and quickly crawled into a cleft in the rocks, hidden by thick bushes. Once the young hero had recovered a little from his fear, he looked around carefully. Seeing no sign of the griffin, he began to crawl cautiously through the thick bushes. Suddenly, he came face to face with 3 beautiful young women. They too had been stolen by the griffin in childhood, but how they had escaped the creature is another tale. When the maidens saw the noble-looking boy in his fine clothes approaching, they were terrified. Believing he was a dwarf from the mountain depths, they quickly disappeared into a rocky cave nearby. But as soon as Hagen spotted them, he rushed after them. "Where do you come from?" they cried out. "Go away and do us no harm. We have suffered enough already." "Please, noble maidens," said Hagen, "do not send me away. I'm starving. A terrible griffin brought me to this place. If you help me, I will gladly tell you where I came from." Once they realized that he was truly a human child, the girls were overjoyed. They hugged him and welcomed him kindly. They gave him food and drink and brought him into their cave. There he lived with them for many days and years, growing strong and courageous under their gentle care. One day, a group of pilgrims happened to sail near the island. Hagen and the maidens watched them with joy, thinking at last the time of their rescue had come. But suddenly, dark clouds rolled in and a violent storm struck. Lightning split the sky and thunder boomed. The ships were tossed wildly by the sea. One after another was shattered against the rocks, despite the desperate efforts of the poor pilgrims. When the storm ended, not a single soul remained alive. The next morning, the shoreline was covered with broken ship pieces and drowned bodies. The griffin came and carried many of the dead to its nest to feed its young. Among the bodies, Hagen noticed the corpse of a knight who had been thrown against the rocks by the waves. Acting quickly, he took the knight's armor, helmet, sword, bow, and quiver. Just as he finished arming himself, he heard a strange sound among the stones. The griffin was returning. But Hagen now had weapons and courage. He drew an arrow and shot it straight at the beast. It bounced off the griffin's thick hide and fell harmlessly to the ground. The monster rushed at him in fury. But Hagen's sword flashed through the air. He sprang aside and slashed off one of the griffin's wings. The creature struck at him with a claw, but Hagen cut it clean off. Soon, the beast lay dead at his feet. A cry of joy came from the cave, but no sooner had the sound escaped than the girls cried out in fear again. A whole swarm of griffins was flying down from the cliffs. Hagen, now confident and battle-ready, raised his sword. It gleamed like lightning in his hands. A fierce battle followed, but the youth fought with unmatched bravery. Any lesser man would have fallen, but Hagen stood firm. At last, he killed every one of the monstrous creatures. Then he called out, "Come out, dear maidens! For the first time, you can enjoy the sun and air without fear." They ran joyfully to him, praising and thanking him again and again for slaying the terrifying griffins. From that moment, a new life began for Hagen. He devoted himself to training with the weapons he had taken. Before long, he could shoot birds from the sky with his arrows. Even fish swimming below the surface could not escape his aim. He spent his days roaming the forests, running as swiftly as a deer. To the amazement, and sometimes fear, of the maidens, he could leap across streams and deep gorges with the strength and agility of a panther. One day, a dragon leapt at him from a dark, rocky cleft. Hagen met it head-on, split its skull with his sword, and watched it die in a writhing heap. After it stopped moving, he tasted its blood, and at once felt new strength flow into him. He drank more and found he had gained the strength of 12 men. He took the dragon's skin as a trophy and brought it back to the cave. Not long after that, he encountered a lion in the forest. But when Hagen let out his mighty hunting cry, the lion turned in fear and ran. He chased it down, captured it alive, tied its jaws and claws with ropes made of plant fibers, and carried it on his shoulders back to the maidens. Until then, they had been unable to make fire and had eaten raw food. But Hagen could now strike sparks from the rocks. With this new skill, they could cook their meals properly, and their food became more nourishing and satisfying. Over time, the maidens grew stronger and even more beautiful. One day, Hagen said, "Let us follow the shoreline of this island. Perhaps elsewhere we will find a ship that might carry us back home." They set out at once to search along the shore. The maidens were dressed in garments they had skillfully made from plant fibers. After wandering for 25 days, they finally spotted a ship in the distance. Hagen's voice rang louder than the crashing waves as he shouted toward the vessel. His cries reached the crew, but when they saw the strangely dressed girls, they feared they were water spirits or sea maidens and did not dare to send a boat to shore. Then Hagen called out again, this time invoking God's name and begging for help. At this, the count who commanded the ship ordered a boat to be lowered. He and 12 knights rowed to the shore. When they landed, he was struck by the incredible beauty of the young women, though their rough garments embarrassed them, and they quickly hid in a thicket to avoid being seen. Some of the knights returned to the ship and brought back proper clothing for women. The girls quickly changed in the shelter of the trees, and once they were dressed, the count invited them and Hagen aboard his vessel. The crew greeted the maidens kindly once they saw they were not magical beings, but real young women. After giving them food and drink, the count asked what misfortune had brought them to such a wild and distant island. The girls were reluctant to speak of their past to a stranger, but they could not refuse such a request from their rescuer. At last, the eldest spoke. "My father was king in farthest India, and I was taken from him by a griffin. I fear I will never see my homeland again." The second maiden followed. "I too came from a distant kingdom. My noble father, surely grieving deeply for my loss, was king of Portugal, honoured by many princes." Finally, the youngest said, "My home is in Iceland. The griffin stole me away. My father loves me so dearly that I know he would gladly give his crown to anyone who could return me to him." "It was surely by God's will that you were brought to that island," the count replied. "And it is by his will that you have now been saved. Place your trust in him." He then turned to Hagen. "Your companions have shared their names and stories with me. Now I would like to know yours, bold youth, and how you came to be on that island." "My fate was the same as theirs," Hagen answered. "I too was taken there by the griffin. As for my father, he is King Sigurbrand of Ireland." The count then asked, "Does the monster still live?" Hagen's eyes flashed as he gripped his sword. "No," he replied. "I killed the beast and all its young." All eyes turned toward the young hero in astonishment. The knights murmured among themselves, some praising him aloud. "Truly, that is a deed worthy of eternal fame. Many of us would not have stood a chance against such a monster." But Hagen noticed that they were whispering together and watching him closely. A few even began trying to remove his weapons without his noticing. His anger rose. "Do not try any treachery," he warned them sternly. Still, the count whispered to his men, "We will get what we want by force if we must." Then, turning back to Hagen, he said harshly, "You have fallen into my hands at the right time. Many wrongs have been done to me by warriors from Ireland, so I will hold you prisoner until your father pays me compensation." Hagen answered with calm but firm words, "Whatever harm you may have suffered from Irish warriors, I am not to blame. Still, take me home, and I swear to you, you will be well rewarded." "No," said the count, "it is safer for me to keep you as my prisoner. As for the maidens, I will give them away to my men." At these words, Hagen's temper broke. "By my honour," he shouted, "I will not be your prisoner, and you shall not lay a single hand on the maidens." Then he turned to the sailors. "Good mariners," he called, "if you follow my lead and carry me back to Ireland, I will reward you beyond measure. But if you betray me, you will have cause to regret it." But the count, determined to seize Hagen, gave the command to take him by force. At once, Hagen drew his sword, and a fierce battle broke out on the ship. Heads rolled across the deck and into the sea, and Hagen kicked the bodies in after them. No one could stand against him. At last, those who were not slain fled in terror to the farthest corner of the ship's hold. Then Hagen turned on the Count and would have killed him too, but the maidens threw themselves between them and pleaded with Hagen for mercy. At their request, the hero sheathed his sword and gave orders that the ship was to sail under his command. No one dared resist him after that, and so the voyage home to Ireland began. The sailors needed no further words or threats. They obeyed every order in silence, afraid even of Hagen's glance. On the 17th day, they came within sight of the castle where Hagen's parents lived. The sailors, terrified, feared that King Sigurbrand would have them executed, but Hagen reassured them. "Have no fear," he said. "My father will forgive everything once he learns that it was you who helped bring me back. I will send some of you ahead with a message. Tell him I am still alive. No harm will come to those who bring such news." He selected 12 of them and said, "Go to the court and ask the king if he wishes to see his son again. He may not believe you at first. Then speak to my mother. Ask her if she remembers the golden cross she gave me as a child. She will come with you." The men did as they were told, but when they entered the great hall, King Sigurbrand recognized their clothing and believed they were enemies. He stood up in anger. "How dare you come here?" he demanded. One of the men stepped forward and said, "My lord, your son Hagen sent us. He is alive and waiting nearby." "Lies!" cried the king. "How could he still live? I saw him taken from me with my own eyes. I have mourned his death for many years." The messengers then turned to the queen. "Do you still remember the golden cross you gave your son?" they asked. At once, a wave of hope and joy washed over her. "Let us go at once to the shore," she cried. "Let me see the cross with my own eyes." The king ordered horses to be brought without delay, and he and the queen rode quickly out of the castle, followed by a noble procession. By this time, Hagen had landed with the maidens and the knights. When he saw his parents approaching, his heart filled with joy and his eyes brimmed with tears. Crowds of people gathered to see him, for he had grown into a strong and noble hero. The king greeted him cautiously. "If you truly are the son I lost," he said, "then my old age will be filled with happiness." As his mother drew near, Hagen took the golden cross from his chest and held it out to her. With a joyful cry, she threw her arms around him and wept tears of happiness. His father embraced him too, overcome with emotion. Then Hagen spoke up on behalf of the Count. He asked his father to forgive him. And King Sigurbrand, unwilling to deny his newly returned son anything, took the Count's hand in peace and agreed to make amends for any wrongs that had passed between them. Together, they all returned joyfully to the castle. The queen welcomed the maidens like daughters of her own and gave them fine clothing and comforts. Soon afterward, Hagen chose the maiden from India, whose name was Hilda, as his wife. After the death of his parents, he became king himself and reigned as one of the greatest rulers of his time. In time, Queen Hilda bore him a daughter who was also named Hilda. She later became queen of our land, and it is her daughter Gudrun, whose wrongs we now sail forth to avenge. May God grant that her child, Gudrun, is still alive, Frute concluded solemnly. Night had fallen while the old knight was speaking. The full moon now hung high in the sky, and the stars above seemed to shine gently down upon the group of listening warriors. Chapter 5. The Mermaid's Prophecy. One day, Gudrun stood with Hildberg on the seashore, watching the sun sink like a fiery ball into the glowing waves. As they gazed into the crimson light, something appeared on the surface of the water. At first, it looked like a white swan, but as it drew nearer, they saw that it was a beautiful mermaid. The maiden stared in amazement until the mermaid spoke. "If you seek comfort, ask me what you wish to know." Gudrun was the first to speak. "Does my mother still live?" she asked, "and is all well with her?" The mermaid replied gently, "Gladly will I tell you what will bring joy to your heart. Queen Hilda lives and hopes every day for your safe return. She has prepared a mighty fleet, such as the seas have rarely seen." At this, Gudrun's eyes lit up. "And my brother, Ortwin? Tell me, kind spirit, does Herwig, my betrothed, still live?" In a silvery voice, the mermaid answered, "They are both well. Even now they are at the sea. Soon you will see proof that you have not been forgotten." Tears of joy shone in Gudrun's eyes. "These are joyful tidings, truly," she said. "But tell me more. Do Irolt and Morin come too?" "Many a Norman helmet shall be broken beneath their swords," the mermaid replied. Then, without another word, she vanished beneath the waves. The two girls cried out in disappointment, wishing they could ask more questions. "Come back to us, sweet messenger," Gudrun called. The water parted once again, and the mermaid reappeared. "Ask what you will," she said. Gudrun asked quickly, "Hartmut and Ludwig are well armed, with many brave knights to help them. Please tell me, has Horant joined our kin? I would grieve to know his sword was missing in the coming battle." "He is among the heroes on the fleet," the mermaid replied. "When the fighting begins to free you and avenge your father and his followers, it will be Horant who carries your mother's banner." "And Fruit and what, eh?" Gudrun asked. "Are they with our knights as well?" "In truth," the mermaid said, "none are truer friends to you than those two. Fruit sails aboard the ship steered by the mighty arm of Count Wati." As the mermaid prepared to leave again, Gudrun cried out once more, "Tell me, I beg you, when will the first messenger from my mother come to me?" The mermaid smiled and said as she sank slowly beneath the water, "Tomorrow morning, 2 messengers will appear, both warriors, and both worthy of your trust." Gudrun and Hildberg returned to their duties, filled with joy and hope. So excited were they by the news that they completed only part of their work, talking all the while of the dear friends they would soon see. When they returned that evening, Galinda met them with harsh words and bitter scolding. "You lazy, useless girls," she snapped. "Is this all you have done?" Hildberg tried to explain. "Please, be patient with us, madam. We are working as hard as we can. It's the bitter wind on the shore. It slows us down." Galinda replied coldly, "What do I care for the wind? Be at your work early tomorrow. There is much to prepare for the feast. And if all is not finished by nightfall, you will suffer more than any servant of a king has ever suffered." After a meagre supper of dry bread and water, the 2 girls went to their sleeping quarters. Nothing more than a bare chamber with 2 hard benches, without even a pillow for rest. They could not sleep. Their hearts raced with anticipation, and they watched eagerly for the first sign of dawn. Finally, a faint light crept into the room, and Hildberg rose to look out the window. "Oh no," she cried. "Snow fell during the night. If we are forced to wash clothes in the icy wind, they'll find us frozen dead on the shore before sunset." Gudrun shivered at the thought, but she quickly reminded Hildberg of the mermaid's promise. "Remember, the messengers will come to us today. We must be there to meet them. And listen, go to the queen and ask for shoes. If I ask, she'll refuse out of spite, but she may listen to you." Hildberg agreed and went to Galinda's chambers, where the queen still lay in her fine, warm bed. But the young girl dared not wake her, so she returned in silence and sorrow. Soon, Galinda appeared, already in a foul temper. "Why are you not at your work?" she barked. "Snow has fallen, O queen," Hildberg pleaded. "We beg you, give us shoes, or we will surely freeze." But Galinda only laughed cruelly. "Let your pride keep you warm," she sneered. "You'll get no shoes from me, and see to it that your work is finished by nightfall. Your deaths would mean nothing to me. Fools." Weeping, Gudrun cried out, "It may be God's will that I one day remind you of these words." And so, barefoot in the bitter March snow, the two young women made their way down to the icy seashore to begin their painful task. Beyond the royal castle, the coast was covered with thick woods that stretched for miles. Hidden among the trees, the fleet from Hagelingen had remained concealed for 2 full days, having finally reached the shores of Normandy after their long and exhausting journey. The horses were led ashore to stretch their stiffened legs, and preparations for battle began in earnest. Count Warte ordered his men to check their armour carefully. "Make sure every helmet and hauberk is securely fastened," he said. "If anyone finds his coat of mail too loose, he may take another. Queen Hilda has provided 500 fresh suits of armour. Each good knight may claim one as his due." Then the leaders gathered for a council. Ortwin spoke first. "From the hilltop, Frute saw 7 castles, but we do not yet know which one is the stronghold of Ludwig and Hartmut. That is the one we must strike first. And before we attack, we must also discover where Gudrun and the other maidens are held." "We need spies," said Frute. "I will go," announced Ortwin. "I will find what we need to know." All the others objected, but the young warrior was firm. "It is my right. Gudrun is my sister." "She is also my betrothed," said Herwig, "and so I will go with you." Wart was angered by this and tried to stop them. "This is sheer foolishness," he said. "If one of our knights were caught, that would be bad enough. But what if they capture both of you? How would we answer for that?" "We cannot shrink from danger where Gudrun's rescue is concerned," Herwig replied. "No one in the army cares as deeply about her as we do. Do not argue further, good Warty. Our minds are made up." They summoned their comrades and reminded them of the oaths they had taken. Ortwin said, "Listen well, brave warriors. If we are taken and held for ransom, sell your lands and riches to free us if you must. But if we are killed, then avenge us as true comrades should, and above all, do not rest until Gudrun and the other maidens are delivered." Each warrior pledged himself to this vow and clasped hands with the princes. Ortwin and Herwig then took leave of the others, boarded a boat, and rowed away, followed by many anxious glances. They kept close to the shoreline and had nearly reached the nearest castle when they rounded a bend and saw 2 young women standing on the shore. At the sight of the approaching knights, Gudrun was seized with a mix of fear and joy. "These must be the messengers we were promised," she said. "But how can I face them like this, in rags and disgrace? Should I stay at my work or run and hide?" "You must do what seems right," said Hildberg. "Choose quickly and I will follow." Gudrun turned and ran. The knights saw the girls trying to escape and leapt ashore, hoping to speak with them. "Why do you flee, fair maidens?" they called. "We mean you no harm. Come back, or you will lose the fine garments lying here on the beach." The girls kept running. Then Herwig shouted, "In the name of all that is honourable in women, I charge you, answer us." Gudrun stopped and wept. "Have we ever forgotten what honour requires?" she cried. "I will flee no more." She turned and walked back with Hildberg at her side. The knights stared in wonder. Though the girls wore almost nothing and shivered in the falling March snow, their dignity and noble bearing still shone through. "Do not be afraid," Ortwin said gently. "May God punish any man who would harm you. You look more fit for crowns than for labouring on this shore. Tell us, does your master have many washerwomen as fair as you?" "There are others in the castle more beautiful than we," Gudrun answered. "But please, kind sirs, let us return to our task. If our mistress finds us idle, she will punish us severely. Ortwin held out 4 gold rings. "Take these," he said. "They are yours if you will only answer our questions truthfully." Gudrun shook her head. "We may not accept gifts," she said, "but ask quickly, for we must not stay long. If anyone learns that we spoke with you, the cost will be high." Herwig asked, "To whom do all these lands and castles belong?" "King Ludwig rules this land," Gudrun replied. "He holds his court in that castle." "Is Hartmut there now?" Herwig asked. "He is," said Gudrun, "and with him are 4,000 knights." The maidens hesitated to leave, drawn to the strangers whose voices reminded them of home. Ortwin pressed further. "Why are so many knights gathered here? Does Hartmut fear an attack?" "I do not know," Gudrun replied. Then she added quietly, "There is one land far away that Hartmut may fear. It is called Hagelingen." At the mention of their homeland, tears fell from Gudrun's eyes, and she turned away to hide them. Seeing the girls tremble from the cold, the knights offered their cloaks, but Gudrun refused. "May God reward your kindness," she said, "but no one shall ever see me in a man's clothing." Herwig looked closely at her, troubled by a sense of recognition. She reminded him of the woman he had once loved, believing her now to be Hartmut's queen. Ortwin asked, "Were there not noble maidens brought here from a distant land? One of them bore the name Gudrun." Gudrun's voice trembled. "Yes, I know her well. She came here as a captive, and she has suffered greatly." "Then tell us, where can we find her?" they cried. "You will not find her," Gudrun answered. "She is dead from sorrow and lies beneath the earth." Herwig covered his face. Ortwin turned away and leaned on his sword, overcome with grief. "Why are you so moved by this news?" Gudrun asked. "You act as though you were kin to her." Herwig could bear it no longer. "She was more than kin. She was my bride. She was pledged to me before Hartmut took her from her home." "Lies!" Gudrun shouted. "You are not Herwig. He would have come long ago to rescue her, or at least to free her companions, one of whom am I." "I speak the truth," said Herwig. "If you truly are one of Gudrun's maidens, then you will know this ring. She once gave it to me." Gudrun's face lit with joy. "I know it well," she said, "for I am Gudrun, and I gave it to you. And see, this ring upon my hand? You placed it there yourself." Now at last they knew one another. Brother and sister, betrothed and bride, stood together again, weeping with joy and sorrow. Ortwin, still thinking her to be Hartmut's wife, asked, "How could you, a queen, come to such misery and servitude?" Gudrun replied through her tears, "Could you believe I would marry King Hartmut? I have remained true to my vow to Herwig, and for that I have suffered greatly." Herwig cried out, "Let us take you to the boat at once. Our fleet is near. We will bring you home. Your suffering is over." But Ortwin stepped forward. "No, much as I love my sister, I would rather lose her 100 times than carry her off in secret like a thief." "Think what danger she faces if we are discovered," Herwig argued. "We may never reach her again." "Do not fear," Ortwin said. "Even if they hide her in the deepest dungeon, you shall see her tomorrow. But if they try to keep her, I will die beside her before I let her be stolen away in silence." "Have I done wrong to you, my brother?" Gudrun asked softly. "That you would leave me here even one day longer? If you knew what I've endured, you would take me with you this very hour." "It is not lack of love, dear sister," Ortwin said gently. "But we must do what is right. This is not the way." Herwig reluctantly agreed, and the 2 knights took their leave and returned to their boat. Gudrun wept bitterly. "Will my trials never end?" she cried. "For years I have waited for this moment, only to be left behind again just when hope had returned. "Only for a short time, dearest," Herwig called from the boat. "We will return with honour. At sunrise tomorrow we shall be before the castle with our army. Be brave. Tell no one what you have seen. God will help us." Then the boat slipped out of sight behind the bend in the shore. Now it happened that Herregard, the damsel who had married Hartmut's cupbearer, saw the two knights speaking with Gudrun and Hildberg on the shore. Mistaking them for fishermen, she told Queen Galinda that Gudrun had kissed and embraced them. Galinda rushed to a window and saw the maidens standing idly, speaking eagerly to one another. Indeed, they were doing just that, for their hearts were full of joy, and their thoughts were fixed on the great happiness that awaited them the following day. "Two noble kings have held me in their arms today," said Gudrun. "Never again will I shame myself with the tasks Galinda forces upon me." "But perhaps we should finish what we've been assigned," said Hildberg. "That wretched woman will punish us more cruelly than ever if we leave it undone." "I care not," cried Gudrun, lifting her head proudly. And with that, she flung all the laundry into the sea. For a short while, the garments floated on the waves. Then they sank beneath the surface and disappeared. By now, darkness had begun to fall. The maidens returned to the castle, where Galinda met them with fury. "Why have you returned so late?" she shouted at Gudrun. "You scorn the love of mighty kings, and yet you consort with low-born knaves upon the beach, exchanging words and kisses as if you had no shame. Deny it not. Herregard saw you herself. So much for your royal pride." "Shame by your words." Gudrun stood tall, her cheeks flushed with anger. "That is a shameful lie," she said. "Never have I spoken to a man in this land, save those I knew to be friends or kin." "You dare call me a liar?" Galinda roared. "You will pay dearly for this, you spiteful wretch." "Be careful what wrong you do me," Gudrun warned. "I am of nobler blood than you, and one day your house and all its crimes will be called to account." Galinda then noticed the empty baskets. "Where are the garments?" she demanded. "At the bottom of the sea," Gudrun answered calmly, "and they may stay there for all I care." "Now you shall suffer," screamed Galinda. Shaking with rage, she ordered that thorns be brought to scourge Gudrun's back, and told two servants to bind her to a post with hempen cords. The women in the hall cried out in protest, weeping in distress. But Gudrun, in that desperate moment, turned to cunning for her defence. "Queen Galinda," she said, "you are greatly mistaken. Think, how could I ever wear the crown of Normandy if I had been whipped like a common slave in your land?" Galinda stared at her in disbelief, speechless. "I speak the truth," Gudrun continued. "If it is still his will, I will wed your son and become Queen of Normandy." Some knights overheard these words and rushed off to tell Hartmut, hoping for a reward. At that moment, Hartmut sat in his chamber with his companions, listening to the tale of an old warrior's exploits. Suddenly, the door burst open, and a knight cried out, "Good news, noble king! Lady Gudrun has softened at last. She agrees to be your wife." "Surely you are mad," Hartmut replied. "She has rejected me for years. But if this is true, if she truly consents, you shall have 3 castles, the lands that go with them, and 60 rings of gold. Then indeed will my life be blessed." A second knight entered and said, "The queen sends word. Gudrun has agreed to marry you. She awaits you now." Hartmut leapt up with joy and rushed to Gudrun's side. She still wore her ragged, wet garments, and her eyes filled with tears as he approached. Though she had resorted to this trick out of necessity, it pained her deeply to deceive him. As he moved to embrace her, she stepped back and said, "No, my lord Hartmut, not yet. It would not be fitting for a great king to embrace a serving maid in such disgrace. When I am dressed as a queen, wearing the crown, then you may take me in your arms before all your knights." "Most noble maiden," Hartmut replied, "since you are to be my wife, I will do all you ask." "If that is truly so," said Gudrun, "then my first wish is this: prepare a bath for me and restore my maidens to me." Hartmut agreed at once and ordered that her companions be released from their work. Soon they entered the hall, dressed in ragged clothing, their hair tangled and unkempt. "Look, O king," said Gudrun, pointing to them. "See the condition of these noble-born maidens. Surely this brings no honour to your court." "It shall be different now," Hartmut promised. "From this moment forward, they will be treated as they deserve." "Then see to it that they are given clothing fit for their rank," Gudrun said. "All of them are daughters of princes." Hartmut issued the orders, and the maidens were led away to be cared for. The attendants, eager to gain Gudrun's favour, worked quickly. Before long, the girls returned in beautiful garments, their faces clean and bright. Yet beside Gudrun, they seemed like stars fading in the presence of the sun. Hartmut had rich food set before them, with wine and mead in golden cups. Then he sent for his sister Ortrun to share in his joy. When Ortrun heard the news, she hurried to Gudrun. The two embraced and wept in each other's arms. They sat together, joyful but with different hopes. Ortrun rejoiced to welcome Gudrun as a sister, while Gudrun's heart beat fast with thoughts of her friends and the rescue she knew was coming. "We had already agreed," said Ortrun gently, "that I would wear the crown, for Hartmut would never marry another since you rejected him. But now, dearest Gudrun, I gladly give up crown and honours to you." Ortrun's tender words brought tears to Gudrun's eyes. She replied softly, "Never have you shown me anything but kindness. May God bless you for it. And I will never forget how my suffering has often caused you pain as well." Then Gudrun turned to Hartmut and said, "Send messengers to summon all your noble friends to court without delay. Only when these lords have pledged their loyalty to me will I accept the crown of your kingdom in peace and security." Hartmut agreed at once and, without delay, selected 100 knights to ride out that very night and deliver his summons. Gudrun was secretly pleased, for she knew that these men, among Hartmut's strongest, would be far from the castle by morning and unable to fight when the battle came. After this, she asked to be left alone with her maidens, since they had only just been reunited after years apart. Hartmut and Galinda readily agreed to her request. Ortrun kissed Gudrun gently and withdrew, and Hartmut sent in servers and cupbearers, who again filled the tables with food and drink. One of the maidens, unable to contain her sorrow, cried out, "My heart is breaking. We shall never return home. We must remain here forever, among the people who brought us so much pain." She began to weep, and soon the others joined her in grief. Gudrun said nothing of the hope that filled her heart, but she could not hold back her joy, and at one point she even laughed aloud. This sound reached Galinda's ears, and she hurried to tell King Ludwig, and then went straight to Hartmut. "My son," she warned him, "believe me, something dreadful is coming. Gudrun, who has not smiled in all these years, has just laughed out loud." The sound was heard from the hall. Surely she has received some secret message with good news. "Be careful. See that your warriors are ready and armed." But Hartmut was too filled with happiness to consider any danger. "Let the girl have her joy," he replied. "Her friends are far away. There's no way they could come here to find her." After their meal, Gudrun asked the attendants whether beds had been made ready for her and the other maidens. They lit torches and led the women to a large chamber. There, 30 beds had been arranged, each one covered with rich pillows made of brightly woven Arabian cloth, and topped with silk coverlets threaded with gold that sparkled like fire in the lamplight. "We are ready now to rest. Rest we have long been denied," said Gudrun. "Leave us and shut the door behind you." Once they were alone, the maidens fastened the doors. They all gathered around the table, where rare wines had been placed for them. Gudrun spoke in a low voice. "Now, dear friends, I can finally tell you what joy awaits us. All of you have remained faithful to me and to our homeland. Except one, Herregard, who has betrayed us, and will soon pay for it, I fear. Today, my brother Ortwin and my betrothed Herwig came to me with good news. Tomorrow, you shall see them outside the castle, leading their army." The maidens could scarcely contain their excitement. "Listen closely," Gudrun continued. "Whoever among you is the first to see our friends' banners at daybreak and tells me of it will be richly rewarded." Their hearts surged with joy, but Gudrun, ever cautious, reminded them to remain quiet. "There may be spies or listeners behind the door," she said. "Let no sound escape this room that might betray what we know." When Ortwin and Herwig returned from their mission, the other heroes rushed to meet them joyfully, eager for news. "Call all the warriors together," said Ortwin, "and then you shall hear all that has passed." When the knights had gathered in a circle around him, Ortwin began. "I wish I had better news, friends. What I must tell you is hard to speak. We have seen my sister Gudrun and her companion Hildberg." One of the knights interrupted him in disbelief. "You must be jesting, Prince Ortwin. How could that be? If Gudrun still lives, surely she would be locked away inside the castle." Ortwin answered solemnly, "I would never mock my comrades, least of all about this. If you doubt my word, ask Herwig. He saw her too, and not as we had hoped. We found her on the shore, working as a washerwoman. Hildberg shares her fate." At this, many of the heroes wept with sorrow and rage. But old Wat shouted out, "Now, by the mass, this is no time for tears. Let us go at once and stain with blood the very linens Gudrun has washed clean for Hartmut and his knights." A council was quickly held to plan the attack, one by land and one by sea. "Let me have them once within reach," said Warty, "and I will repay them well for what they have done to Gudrun. Listen to my plan. Before dawn, one part of our forces will approach the castle by land. I will lead that force. The moon is bright, and before day breaks, we will have the castle surrounded. Then, at sunrise, the rest of you will bring the fleet in from the sea to strike from the other side." Everyone agreed to this plan, and preparations were made without delay. Before daybreak, Wart and his troops had reached the land side of the castle and surrounded it. They were concealed by the forest, and the warriors lay down with their heads on their shields to snatch a little rest. Walt had given them strict orders: be ready at the first light. At the first blast of his hunting horn, they were to seize their weapons. At the second, go to their horses. And at the third, mount up and follow the Queen's banner into battle. Meanwhile, Herwig, Ortwin, and the rest of the knights boarded their ships with their followers and waited for dawn. The night passed quickly, and the morning sun rose in full glory over the sea. From every helmet and coat of mail, from every shield and spear, the sunlight flashed in dazzling brilliance. A river of fire seemed to flow from the woods, across the land, and out into the bay. The castle was encircled in a ring of steel and light. Bright banners fluttered from the hilltops. The ships, sails outstretched like the wings of swans, glided majestically across the water, a truly magnificent sight. In the castle, one of the maidens approached Gudrun's bed and whispered urgently, "Awake, lady, our knights are near." Gudrun sprang up and ran to the window. When she saw the flag snapping in the morning wind and the thousands of warriors marching forward to battle, her eyes filled with tears. She wept to think of how many brave men might fall before the day was over. Suddenly, the castle watchman cried out from the tower, his voice ringing across the ramparts. "Up! Up! To arms, bold knights! The Norman warriors have slept too long!" Queen Galinda heard the alarm and leapt from her bed. She rushed to the battlements and looked down in fear at the hosts surrounding the castle. Then she hurried to wake King Ludwig, who had not yet heard the call to arms. "Awake! Awake, O king!" she cried. "The castle is surrounded. A mighty army has come, and we will pay dearly this day for Gudrun's laughter." Ludwig, half-dressed, told her to be silent. "Let me see this army for myself," he said. "Come what may, I am ready to face it." He went to the window and looked down at the approaching force. "They may be pilgrims come to trade," he said doubtfully. "Send for Hartmut. He will know." Hartmut was already awake but had let his men sleep. He climbed the tower with Ludwig. The sunlight now lit up the fields below, and Hartmut saw clearly the army that lay in wait. "They are not merchants," he said grimly. "They press in too closely." Ludwig peered into the distance. "Tell me what you see, my son," he said. "My eyes are not as sharp as they once were." Hartmut answered slowly and carefully. "I see the banner of Karade on a brown field with a golden head. That means Siegfried leads them. He too once sought to win Gudrun. The white banner with golden bars belongs to Warte. Queen Hilda gave it to him. The old warrior next to him is Fruti, Wat's brother-in-arms. There is Horant, famed for his songs. Perhaps today he'll sing a lullaby for us when we lie in death." Hartmut continued, pointing one by one to the banners. "That red banner with silver sword points belongs to Ortwin, the son of the man you killed on Wolpensand. The sky blue flag with green seaweed is the standard of Herwig, King of Zealand. He hopes to reclaim his bride. Foolish dream, he shall meet death instead. They are forming now. The battle is about to begin. Let us arm." With that, Hartmut went to the hall where his knights still lay sleeping. "Up!" he shouted. "Up, brave warriors! The enemy is at our gates. Arm yourselves quickly. We shall not keep them waiting." The alarm spread through the castle, and the knights armed themselves with swift determination. When Gerlinde learned that her son meant to ride out and meet the enemy in open battle, she rushed to him in protest. "Surely you won't open the gates and risk your life? We have food to last a year. We can outlast a siege. Let them waste their strength against our walls if they wish." Hartmut frowned. "Mother, it is not for you to counsel warriors in matters of battle. Teach the women to embroider silk with gold, that is more fitting. Or send Gudrun to the shore again to wash your garments. Now you see, she still has friends ready to avenge her." But Gerlinde pressed him still. "Only hear me. If you listen to my advice, we shall destroy them before they even reach the castle, and Gudrun will remain our prisoner forever." Seeing that Hartmut would not listen, she turned to the other knights. "Do not throw your lives away. Stay behind the walls and hurl down rocks and beams. Shoot them with bolts from your arblasts." Hartmut sprang to his feet, his voice sharp with anger. "Silence! No more! Do not try to advise those who know better than you what must be done. I was shamed once when I fled from them at Wolpensand. Today I shall redeem that shame with honour as bright as gold. I will meet them on the field. I would rather die in battle than rot inside these walls. Oh, I sure." Gerlinde said no more, but turned to the knights and pleaded. "I beg you, guard my brave son with all your strength. If you fight beside him with equal valour, a glorious victory will be ours." Hartmut's expression softened. "Now you speak well, mother," he said, "and I swear this, all who stand by me faithfully today shall share in the spoils of victory." Chapter 6. Love in the Shadow of Death. Soon, the massive gates of the castle were thrown open, and Hartmut rode out, followed by 3,000 knights. The rest stayed behind to guard the gates and towers. Their banners fluttered proudly, and the morning sun gleamed on polished helmets and shining armour. Warty sounded his hunting horn for the third time, a blast so powerful it seemed to shake the castle walls and made the great forest trees tremble. The old warrior ordered Horant to lead the vanguard and carry Queen Hilda's banner, while he rode from rank to rank, placing his men in position. High above, at a turret window, Gudrun stood watching. She waved a white kerchief, her heart full of fear and hope. As the Norman troops approached, Ortwin asked, "Who is that knight riding at the front? His armour shines like lightning, and he bears himself like a king. Even an emperor would not ride more proudly." "That," replied one of the knights beside him, "is Hartmut, the very man who stole your sister." "Ha! Is it so?" cried Ortwin. "Then let wicked Galinda help him back into the castle, if he survives." He lowered his spear and drove his spurs into his white charger, which reared high before leaping forward into battle. But Hartmut had also seen Ortwin and was prepared to meet him. The two knights charged at one another and crashed together with such force that both horses were thrown to the ground. They sprang up instantly. Golden sword hilts flashed as blades rang out, striking hard against helms and shields. Their duel was fierce and evenly matched. But soon the crush of eager warriors separated them, and the fighting spread across the field. All around them rose the roar of battle. Siegfried was set upon by a group of Hartmut's knights, but he struck them down so furiously that none could stand against him. His blows were deadly, and his enemies fell one after another. Herwig, fighting for the woman he loved, rode joyfully into the fray with his banner flying high. Gudrun, watching from above, recognised him by his noble bearing and shining armour. Ludwig, still powerful despite his age, led his Norman soldiers against the Danes fighting under Queen Hilda's standard. He struck like a wild bear, shattering helmets and pushing deep into enemy lines with every stroke. But Fruti came against him with his Holsteiners and Frisians and slew many of Ludwig's men. Moring and Irolt followed, leaving the battlefield littered with the fallen. Again, the chaos of war brought Ortwin and Hartmut face to face. Their swords clashed with ringing steel as they fought with renewed fury, each determined not to let the other escape this time. Though Ortwin fought valiantly, Hartmut managed to land a heavy blow that pierced his helmet. Blood ran down the young prince's armour. When the Danes saw their leader wounded, they rushed forward in a frenzy. But many brave men were slain before they reached Ortwin and carried him out of danger. Horant rode up, desperate to know who had wounded his friend. "It was Hartmut," said Ortwin through clenched teeth. Hartmut, not far away, heard the words and laughed scornfully. Horant, enraged, handed Queen Hilda's banner to another knight and spurred his horse toward the Norman king. Many men stood between them, but Horant cut them down with deadly force. Seeing this, Hartmut shouted, "That knight has caused enough harm. He shall strike no more." He forced his way through the melee and attacked Horant with such ferocity that he knocked him to the ground. Hartmut would have killed him then and there, but Horant's comrades rushed in and pulled him to safety. So fierce and skilled was Hartmut in battle that even the bravest among Hilda's forces began to wonder if they could ever hope to take the castle. But Ortwin and Horant, once their wounds were tended, returned to the field with unshaken resolve. Meanwhile, Warty was dealing out destruction among the Normans, without pause or mercy. Wherever he fought, the enemy fell before him. Yet for every Norman knight struck down, another seemed to step forward in his place. The fighting grew hotter, more savage with every passing moment. The outcome still hung in the balance. In the thick of battle, Herwig suddenly came face to face with King Ludwig. The old monarch's sword dripped with the blood of fallen warriors, and his powerful strokes still struck fear into those who saw him. "Who is that aged warrior wielding his sword with such deadly fury?" Herwig asked. Ludwig heard the question and replied with a defiant shout. "I am Ludwig, king of this land. If any man seeks combat, let him come forward and face me." "If you are Ludwig," Herwig answered, "then you have earned my hatred well. It was you who killed King Hetel on the island of Wolpensand, along with many of my dearest comrades. You also stole my betrothed from me. Today, I will reclaim her by walking over your lifeless body." "Boy, you hardly need to declare yourself," Ludwig said with scorn, "but you'll pay dearly for such bold words." At once, the two kings charged at each other, their followers shouting around them. Herwig fought with the fury of a stormy sea, while Ludwig stood firm like a towering grey cliff against crashing waves. Their duel was fierce and unrelenting. Then, Ludwig raised his sword high and brought it crashing down on Herwig's head with such force that the young king staggered and dropped to one knee. Ludwig lifted his blade again for a final blow, but before it could fall, one of Herwig's loyal knights leapt forward and took the stroke himself. He fell dead, but his sacrifice gave Herwig's comrades time to carry their prince from the battlefield. Herwig quickly regained his senses. Looking up at the tower where Gudrun stood watching, he cried out, "It would be a disgrace to my knighthood if Gudrun saw me kneel before that grey-haired tyrant. I must go back and redeem my honour." He rose to his feet and charged once more into the fight, his banner flying behind him and his warriors at his side. Hearing the renewed cries of battle, Ludwig turned, and was stunned to see Herwig alive, riding straight toward him. They clashed again. Their swords flew in blinding arcs, and the air rang with the sound of steel against steel. Their shields grew hot beneath the repeated blows. Then, just as Ludwig raised his sword to strike a deadly blow, Herwig thrust his blade deep into the old king's chest. Ludwig fell. Herwig struck once more, and the Norman king's head rolled across the sand, staining the earth red with his blood. The death of Ludwig was a signal to Herwig's men. With a cry of vengeance, they surged forward like a storm crashing through a forest. The Norman ranks broke beneath their fury, and few of Ludwig's warriors survived the terrible onslaught that followed. When the watchman on the tower announced the death of King Ludwig, loud cries of sorrow and wailing broke out within the castle walls. The sound reached Hartmut on the battlefield, and he called out to ask the reason for such distress. Word came back quickly. His father, the king, had fallen. Hartmut stood still for a moment, then looked out across the battlefield. He saw how his forces were surrounded on every side. Turning to his men, he said, "We have gained honour enough today. Let us now fall back into the castle and wait for a better chance to strike again." His knights were glad to obey. They were weary from the long and bitter fight. But when they tried to retreat, they found the way was already blocked. Wati and his warriors were fighting in front of the main gates. Heavy beams and massive stones rained down from the battlements, and bolts flew through the air like hail. Still, Wati pressed forward, caring for nothing but victory. Between him and the Normans, the bodies of the dead lay piled high. Hartmut turned his gaze to the battlefield once more. "By my faith," he said, "these enemies strike with mighty force. Well, indeed, are they avenging the wrongs of the past." He pointed to the left. "There wave Siegfried's colours, and yet our knights are locked with him in fierce combat. Over there, see that banner with the sword points? That is Ortwin, and many shall fall before he lowers his weapon. And on the far side stands Herwig with his men. None can say he does not fight nobly for his bride." He clenched his jaw. "We have waited too long here in the open. Now we are trapped. They wait for us within the castle, but I fear we shall not return." The secret ways are closed, and we cannot force our way in by stealth or speed. We have only one choice: dismount and carve a path with our swords." At once, the knights leapt from their horses and let the beasts run free. With grim resolve, they raised their blades and pressed forward on foot to cut their way back to safety. Hartmut scanned the field and saw Warte, the old warrior, still at the heart of the fray. He thought to himself, "If I can only strike down that champion, we might yet break through." Drawing his sword, he charged toward Warte. The old hero saw Hartmut coming and did not hesitate. He stepped forward to meet him. The dust rose in clouds beneath their feet. Their swords clashed with such fury that it sounded like hammers striking an anvil in the forge. Blow after blow fell, and the air rang with steel against steel. Neither man gave ground. The fate of the day hung in the balance. Hartmut and Wat were still locked in fierce combat, fighting close beneath the castle walls. Then Hartmut suddenly heard voices from above. His mother, Gerlinda, was shouting, promising rich rewards to any who would kill Gudrun and her maidens. One coward, driven by greed, burst into the hall where the women were gathered. The terrified maidens screamed and fled toward the windows. Hartmut, hearing their cries and guessing what had happened, instantly lowered his sword and stepped back. Looking up, he saw his sister Gudrun struggling with the would-be murderer, forcing him out onto the balcony in a desperate attempt to stop him. At once, Hartmut shouted in a voice like thunder, "Vile traitor! What are you doing among the maidens? Do not dare lay a hand upon them. By my honour, you shall pay with your life for even a single touch, your blood and the blood of your kin." The trembling coward slunk away in shame, and Hartmut turned back to the battle. But the struggle had shifted. More Danish knights had joined the fray, and now Normans rushed to defend their prince. The crush of warriors forced Hartmut and Warte apart despite their efforts to continue the duel. Meanwhile, Gudrun had seen all from the window. She saw her brother's men falling quickly, one after another. In grief and desperation, she rushed to Gudrun, fell to her knees, and clutched her hands, crying, "Have mercy, noble princess, I beg you. Remember your own sorrow when your father was slain. Now my father lies dead at your friend's hands, and my brother, Hartmut, your former suitor, is fighting for his life against Count Warte." Gudrun knelt beside her and embraced her warmly. "Dearest Gudrun," she said, "you have never done me harm. Gladly would I help you now if I could. But how can I stop them? I am no knight. I cannot bear a sword. Still, I will do what I can." She stood and went to the window. Taking her white kerchief, she waved it urgently, hoping someone would see. Herwig, fighting not far from the wall, caught sight of the signal. Seeing Gudrun at the window, he rushed to the foot of the wall and called up to her. "If you love me, noble Herwig," Gudrun cried down, "then save King Hartmut from Count Warte's fury." "Gladly will I serve you, dearest maid," Herwig answered, and turned at once to his men. "To Count Warte's side, comrades, raise our banner and follow me." But the battlefield was crowded, and reaching Warte was no easy task. From a distance, Herwig called out, "Brave Warte, hear me! Gudrun begs you to end the fight. She offers peace to Hartmut." But Warte, his eyes burning with battle rage, would not be moved. "Shall I be ruled by the plea of a maiden?" he shouted. "That would be a shame to my name. I will not stay my sword until Hartmut has paid for his crimes." Herwig pressed forward, determined to stop the duel. But in the heat of the moment, Warte, seeing him coming, struck with a mighty blow, unaware of who he was, and Herwig fell to the ground. This act enraged Herwig's followers, and they surged forward with their banner high. The press of men between Warte and Hartmut became too great to fight through. The two warriors were finally torn apart by the crowd. Hartmut, along with many of his knights, was taken prisoner. Their weapons were seized, and they were led under guard toward the ships of Queen Hilda's army. Chapter 7. A Crown Forged in Sorrow. A full assault on the castle was now underway. The knights whom Hartmut had left behind defended it bravely, launching volleys of bolts and hurling heavy beams and stones down on the attackers. But water could not be pushed back. His warriors hacked at the heavy bolts and hinges with their battle axes, until, at last, the great gates crashed inward. At the same time, Hrant had broken through the walls at another point with Queen Hilda's banner, and Ortwin had climbed up by a siege ladder and gained the battlements. The fighting spread quickly through the courtyard and into the halls and corridors. The entire castle rang with the noise of battle. Chests and cupboards were smashed open in the search for treasure, riches that King Ludwig had once taken from Hegelingen. So much gold and silver, fine linen and silk were found that it filled 2 entire ships. Ortrun fled to Gudrun's chamber in fear. "Alas, dear friend," she cried, "your people are killing everyone they find within the castle. Please protect me. I will surely die if you do not." Gudrun took her by the hand and spoke gently. "You will never lack my help, dear Ortrun. You have only shown me kindness. I wish you peace and happiness with all my heart. Stay here with my maidens. You are safe." Just then, Gerlinda came rushing in. All pride forgotten, she threw herself to the floor before Gudrun and cried out, "Mercy, mercy, noble queen! Please save me from Water and his warriors." Gudrun looked at her sternly. "How dare you ask me for mercy? Did you ever grant it to me? When I pleaded for kindness, you scorned me. Why should I show you favour now?" At that moment, Wat stormed into the chamber. Blood ran down his beard and dripped from his armour. Though Gudrun loved the old hero dearly, she was displeased that he had burst into the women's quarters like a wild beast. Still, she stepped forward to greet him, while her maidens shrank back in fear. Wat bowed and said, "Tell me, who are these women with you?" "This is Ortrun," said Gudrun. "She has always been kind and loyal to me. These are her maids. The others are my own companions, daughters of noble houses who were taken with me from Hegelingen." Warte took a step toward them, but Gerlinda, who had been hiding among the women, suddenly cried out, "Stay back! You are covered in blood! This is no way to appear before noble ladies!" Wat scowled and turned on his heel. Without a word, he left the room and returned to the hall, where battle still raged. He had no sooner gone than Herregard, the faithless maiden who had betrayed Gudrun, rushed in. Her face was pale, her hair dishevelled, and she threw herself at Gudrun's feet, begging for forgiveness. But Gudrun looked down at her coldly. "Away with you, traitor! What pain or hardship did you ever share with me? You only added to my misery." Still, Herregard begged so pitifully that at last Gudrun relented. "Very well," she said, "hide yourself among Ortrun's maidens if you must. But know this, you are no longer worthy to stand with those you betrayed." Meanwhile, Water was searching for Queen Gerlinda. He returned once more to the hall and shouted full of fury, "Lady Gudrun, give me that cursed woman who forced you to wash her clothing, whose wickedness brought you so much suffering." Gerlinda had concealed herself behind the other women. Gudrun, however, did not reveal her. "She is not here," she said calmly. Wat's anger only grew. "Then I'll strike down every woman in this room," he roared, "until she cannot hide any longer." The terrified maidens scattered, and the guilty queen was left exposed. Wat seized her by the hair and dragged her forward. "Well, Gerlinda," he growled, "have you any more laundry for the daughter of my queen to scrub?" Then, without hesitation, he drew his sword and struck off her head. The women screamed at the sight, but Watu turned toward them again and shouted, "Now, show me the one who betrayed you, for she too must die." Gudrun said nothing, but her eyes gave him the answer. Watu looked at Herregard. She threw herself down and pleaded for mercy, but Water sneered. I know well how to deal with women like you. That's why I was made chamberlain." And with that, he swung his sword. Hergart's head fell beside Galinda's. The fighting soon ended. Herwig and Ortwin entered the hall, followed by their comrades. The two princes had laid aside their blood-stained armour. Gudrun met them with tears of joy and embraced them tenderly. Then she turned to her companions and said, "So long as I live, I will never forget your loyalty." And all who heard her knew her words were true. Wate, whose fury had not yet cooled, wanted to burn the castle, but Fruit opposed him. "What would the women do for shelter if you destroy the place?" he asked. "Let the castle stand. It offers safety for now. Instead, let us carry away the dead and clean the halls of blood, so that Our Lady's eyes are not offended by such sights." So the fallen were gathered and carried to the shore. There they and their weapons were thrown into the sea. Hartmut, now a prisoner, was brought to the ships in chains. Gudrun had pleaded for his life and had saved it, but her brother and betrothed would grant no further mercy. Ortwin, however, was allowed to stay with Gudrun. Later, some of the knights rode deeper into Normandy. They stormed 26 more castles and returned with treasures and prisoners, all brought before Gudrun. When they gathered again, Ortwin cried out with joy, "Our journey has ended in triumph. More than we had ever hoped, we have succeeded. And my loyal comrades, I will never forget how faithfully you fought for our cause." "Time moves swiftly," said Wate. "Let us return Queen Hilda's daughter to her at once." Preparations for departure were made quickly. The loot and prisoners were loaded onto the ships, and the hearts of all beat with joy at the thought of home. Ortwin followed Gudrun, weeping. Hartmut was placed on another vessel, along with 500 of his knights. He offered to give his word of loyalty and remain in his homeland, but Wate answered sternly, "We came for you, not your oath, and truly I cannot see why Ortwin allows you to be brought back alive to our land, since you would still gladly take his life if you could. Were it up to me, I would end your misery quickly." For a full year, Queen Hilda received no word from the fleet that had set out to rescue Gudrun. Each day she climbed the battlements of her castle at Matalan to watch the sea, hoping to catch sight of a returning sail. One bright morning in May, when the green meadows were filled with blooming flowers, and the sea lay still and blue beneath the sky, she stood once more at her lookout. Suddenly, she saw a white sail on the horizon, then another, and another still, until an entire fleet came into view. She hurried down from the tower and made her way to the shore, followed by her women. Soon, the beach was filled with men, women, and children, all straining to see. As they recognized the symbols on the sails, shouts of joy rose into the air. Closer and closer came the ships. Sunlight glinted on helmets and armor. Banners fluttered in the breeze, and music rang out. Drums, trumpets, flutes, and cymbals played in triumph. What ship was the first to reach the land? The old warrior leapt ashore, followed by Eralt and Fruit. They approached Queen Hilda and bowed low. "God has answered your prayers," Wart said. "On that ship drawing near are Gudrun and Ortwin, along with Herwig, your daughter's noble betrothed." The queen raised her hands to heaven, tears of joy streaming down her face. And as she watched, her beloved children stepped onto their homeland once more, followed by knights and maidens. Ortwin and Herwig placed Gudrun in her mother's arms, and Hilda held her close as though she would never let her go again. The joy of their reunion was so great that even battle-hardened knights wept openly. After Hilda had embraced Ortwin and Herwig, Gudrun stepped forward and led another maiden to her. "Take this maiden into your heart as well, dear mother," said Gudrun. She has been a faithful friend to me. I do not welcome any girl who is a stranger to me, the queen replied. Gudrun leaned in and whispered, You must greet her mother. She is King Ludwig's orphan daughter. What? Hilda cried sharply. She, the child of the Norman king? That house has brought me nothing but pain. She turned to Audrun, who stood silently before her, and pointed to the ruins of the old castle. Behold what your kin have done, she said. There are dungeons beneath those stones, and there you shall go. Gudrun burst into tears, but Audrun stepped in. Dear mother, he said gently, Audrun deserves no such anger. She is innocent in all this sorrow. And if not for her, added Gudrun, I might never have lived to see you again. At this, Queen Hilda's heart softened. She gave her hand to Audrun and kissed her. If what my children say is true, she said, then you shall be rewarded for your kindness. Next, Gudrun brought forth Hildberg. This maiden, too, deserves your thanks, she said. She shared my every sorrow and never once failed me. She shall have the reward due to the faithful, the queen replied warmly. After all the warriors and maidens had been welcomed, the company returned to the castle. A great feast had been prepared and all gathered in celebration. Hartmut, however, remained bound in chains. Gudrun thought deeply about how to turn all this into a lasting peace, for that was her greatest wish. The next day, after the meal had ended, she turned to her brother and said, Listen to the counsel I offer you, dear brother. There is much good to be gained by it. I would have you marry Audrun, King Ludwig's daughter. You will not find a truer heart in all the world. She does seem good and noble to me, Audrun replied, but we have killed her father and her mother. Would she find joy by my side? Let your love help her forget her grief, said Gudrun. Audrun agreed. Gudrun then called Herwig and shared the plan. He was pleased and said, Yes, let us work to ensure that there is lasting peace between the Normans and our people. Gudrun next approached her mother to ask for Hartmut's release. At first, Queen Hilda refused, but Gudrun pleaded so sincerely that she finally agreed, on the condition that Hartmut be freed without weapons. Soon, Hartmut entered the hall. He carried himself proudly and with unshaken courage, though he did not know whether he would live or die. Still, all who saw him admired the bold and noble prince. Let me speak with him privately, Gudrun said. She led him to a window alcove and began, If you will follow my advice, noble Hartmut, I can help bring an end to all your troubles. I trust your wisdom, dearest princess, said Hartmut. I know you would never counsel anything that would stain my honour. Then help us seal peace between our peoples, said Gudrun. My brother will marry your sister, Audrun, and I ask you to take Lady Hildberg for your wife. There is no nobler maiden in all the land. She will be loyal and true to you, as she was to me in my darkest hours. So be it, Hartmut replied. If you believe Audrun will find happiness with your brother, then I will gladly take Lady Hildberg as my queen. Overjoyed, Gudrun brought the news to Audrun and Hildberg, whose hearts were already well inclined toward their suitors. In the presence of Queen Hilda and the full court, the two couples pledged themselves to one another. Great joy swept through the hall, and even old Worte, who had once burned with hatred for the Normans, laid aside his anger. He gave his hand in peace to both Hartmut and Audrun. Soon after, the weddings were celebrated, and solemn oaths of peace were sworn between the two kingdoms. The reconciliation brought about by Gudrun's wisdom and kindness brought lasting peace to all the people. Her name was honoured by all, her courage and faithfulness praised, and her memory lived on, bright and shining like the stars in the heavens.